Hey guys, Alan here. Welcome back to the workshop. Today I want to look at this saw. There's an issue with it that's been bugging me. I've had it for many years. It's probably, might well be nearly, doesn't matter, it's old. Anyway, so I've been using it to help my lad build a raised flower bed in his back garden, or you might call it an elevated catwalk. I guess it depends who you ask. Anyway, to the issue. When you go to set the depth, cutting depth on this thing, there's a quadrant gear here, or quadrant slot I suppose you'd say, and you slacken this lever off, and you should be able to push the base plate down to make it a shallower cut. But I think you can probably see that when you first try and push it down, the top of this quadrant is just moving over, and as a guide it's just cocking. Once you get started, it's all right, but it takes great delight in jamming at the bottom there, and then it doesn't want to move, and that's really given me the pip. So the project is to try and find a way of fixing that bad behaviour. So I'll start pulling the saw apart a little bit so we can get a better look, and we'll come back and see if I can come up with some ideas on what to do about it. Okay, so I've removed the saw blade and the blade guard, and what I want to focus on is this little feature here. So this little doodad here is actually a post which would screw into a threaded hole in this the body of the saw, and there's a groove there. Magnetic. There's a groove there, and the spring that holds the blade guard into its position hooks over that little post. So I've removed that post and this is a 4mm thread, and just put a cap screw in there, socketed cap screw in there. So if we turn it over and look at it from a different angle, so this is a bit awkward, but I've stood the saw up and you're now looking at the other side of that bolt that I've put in, and I've put a little acorn nut on there, a brass acorn nut, and the diameter of that is almost right to fit in the curve at the bottom of this quadrant slot. And perhaps you can see that when I slide this out now, the body of the nut actually rubs here and stops this thing from cocking over. So I think I've got a pretty simple solution here that's going to work out really well. So what I'm going to do is make up a brass bolt basically with what will be a head from this side with the correct diameter to engage properly here, and then on the other side I'll set it up so I can create the feature needed for the end of the spring. So this is another view that shows the thing working, because this thing here is just almost the right size to engage down there. So when I pull this back, this thing still has a think about cocking up, but it can't, because this holds it in position. So basically I'm going to replace this with a bolt going through that way, and a round head on the bolt. I'll make it a cheese head with a slot on it, and the round head will be hopefully the right size to just engage properly back here in the root of this curve. Okay, so I found a piece of scrap brass that'll get the job done. It's 8mm diameter, which is pretty much exactly what I want. We'll try that first. I think it's from a ball cock valve in the cistern. Doesn't matter. Anyway, it's volunteered. It's going to get used. Something like that. That's going to be pretty close to the 4 that I'm looking for. Now let's square this up and get a square shoulder. Right. I haven't really got the opportunity for doing an undercut there because the thing that it's going to thread into isn't very long. So I think what I'm going to have to do instead is put a washer under here to allow for the fact that the thread won't come right up to the end. That seems to be going alright, doesn't it? Okay, so that's finished the thread. Now we'll just clean this up a little bit. Alright, that thread's much longer than we need at this stage. It'll be cut to length in a bit. So anyway, that's all good. We'll just put that back in and clean the end up. Okay, so I've put it in. Just couldn't do that before. It'd always be jamming and mucking about. But maybe you can see that as soon as this thing starts off, it tries to cock that round, but this stops that from happening. So I'm going to call it a cure. Should have done it years ago. Alright, so all that's left to do now is to make a special nut to go on there, which will present like a little spigot with a recess for the spring to hook onto. So that's a fairly trivial thing to do, but nonetheless I'll bring you back when I've done that. Okay, so I've made up a little doodad here to engage with the end of the spring. It was actually made out of one of these things. These are actually circuit board standoffs for an Amiga A300 actually, a few years old, but anyway. So there's a little bit of video here showing how I did that. The key thing was to get the millimetre wide groove for the spring, and none of my parting tools were going to get down to that, so I needed to grind something. And I found a bit of 30mm wide hacksaw blade that fitted in the parting tool holder, so I ground that up, and that made short work of doing the groove and then parting the thing off. Okay, so I've moved over to the Hercus lathe because the big chuck on the other lathe really isn't meant for holding things that small, and there's no delicacy of touch anyway. So we're going to put a 3.3mm hole through this thing and then tap it for M4. Pretty much all the way through now. So that's all good. But what I've also done is I decided that rather than using this, I wasn't that keen on having a brass thread. I would rather have had steel. But also I felt that this bush section could be slightly bigger. So this was the original was just 7.9, and I thought, well, I'll just go a bit bigger, and did a couple of experiments using this broken brass bolt, and finished up with I'm just showing you these measurements in case anybody else wants to follow in my footsteps and make a similar mod. So 9.3mm with a 4mm hole through it, so that so the bolt can pass through it. So now if we just nip that up, I think you'll see that that's just bloody perfect now. with the first version, there was still a little bit of play around this head, so it wasn't always perfectly smooth. But now, as you can see, that's gold. So I'll just put it all back together now. Oh, actually, before I do that, there's one other thing. I just thought I'd mention this. Something to point with. This vertical piece here was just bent up from the base plate, and it was added to the general floppiness of this arrangement. So this piece of metal here was a bit of scrap I welded on there many years ago that took some of the movement out of it. But what I've just done with this arrangement has really got it sorted. Okay, so it's all back together again, and I take it as a good sign that there weren't any pieces left over. And that bolt that I put in and the little bush, I assembled it with some Loctite to make sure that couldn't come undone. And the increased size of the bush turned out to be just perfect, I reckon, because now it just does what it should have done all along. Just operates smoothly. Lock it, unlock it. It just does what it's supposed to do. So very happy with that. Interestingly, I noticed that in various online catalogues, the descendant of this beast is still actually on sale with the same model code. And looking at this design detail here, it hasn't changed very much. They've got it's a slight reinforcement, and also a quadrant here. So when you do the locking at, say, 45 degrees, you lock on this side and here. Well, that's an improvement, I guess. But this piece still looks the same. So I haven't seen a picture to see whether or not Makita has seen fit to do what I've just done, which is to put the bush there, or what. But anyway, job done. I'm happy. I just wish I'd done it many years ago. So hopefully there was something useful there. If you've got one of these saws and you have the same problem, there's a possible solution. In any case, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.